Hello and welcome to my first YouTube video here for the Unmatched community. My name is Chad. For those of you that don't know me in the Discord, my name is Chadicular or Dadicular. Dadicular because I recently became a father. My son is just about 2 months old now, and he's quickly becoming the best unmatched player to ever grace this earth. So very excited to show y'all what he can do. But for today, I will just be showing off the roster for the ranked ladder season 3. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop in. As you can tell, I am an expert with PowerPoint. I really pride myself on that, so you guys are in for a real treat. For those of you who don't know, the ranked ladder is a system that is only made possible through League, which was put together by Frank K in the Discord. He has done an amazing job with this website. I highly recommend checking it out. I will put a link in the description to this, and it's kind of the only way to play ladder currently. So if you are interested at all in ladder, you will have to familiarize yourself with it. If you're not super familiar with it and you've never gone there before, I'll put a link to Zero Skater 12's video in the description that kind of goes through it and also explains how ladder works, which I will not go through here. I will assume, since you're watching the Season 3 video, that you're already familiar with how ladder works. Now, we've talked about mixing up the ladder seasons, potentially adding more fighters, more maps. Originally we've been doing 10 and 5 fighters to maps respectively, but there's been talk of upping that with the large number of characters that we keep adding each year. But currently we will be adding 10 fighters for this round, 5 maps, and I'm happy to announce that we only have one Zero Skater 12 this season, which I know a lot of you are probably excited about this. I, for one, am excited that I will only have to fight one of these competitive monsters this season. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop in to the fighters. I know this is the moment everybody's been waiting for. For those of you who are watching this a little later, between season 2 and 3, we actually had Hell's Kitchen that just dropped between this. So as you can assume, we have Bullseye, Daredevil, and Elektra all gracing us with their presence this season. We also have Achilles returning from season 1. We have 4 fighters returning from season 1. We have Achilles, Yanenga, Dracula, and Robin Hood. We also have Little Red Riding Hood returning from this season 2. And finally, we have Raptors and Buffy, which have never before been in the ladder. And if you've been counting, there is one more fighter that we deem competitively viable that has not been allowed in the ladder, and that is Sherlock. We're kind of waiting for the exact right time when the stars align for us to throw Sherlock in, when he's got enough counters for people to feel comfortable to either play him or play against him, or whatever that may be. Hopefully, if we get enough counters, then nobody ever has to worry about Sherlock ever again, and Joshua can finally get to play him. What's also unique about the ladder are the maps. Now, this season is very unique with the maps because we have a lot of map gimmicks this season. So very excited to see how people feel about that. We have Hanging Gardens. We have the Bronze, which is just one of the most balanced 1v1 maps, I believe, personally, and I know a lot of the Discord holds to this as well. We have the Raft. Now, this season, our goal is to go ahead and give out all the assets for this map, the Raft, and also Hell's Kitchen, which will be included in this season too, in order to basically allow people to play with these maps right out of the gate. Unfortunately, we didn't have the assets from Restoration Games for the previous season to make the Raft readily available, but I believe we have a path forward that we will be going with and deciding to move forward on, so that people can be playing with these maps right out of the gate and they don't have to worry about waiting for someone to create this for them. And then finally, with another map gimmick, we have Heorot. So very excited for this season of maps. These are some of my favorite and some of my least favorite maps, so I think I personally will be polarized here, but I know a lot of people will really enjoy them. So let's go ahead and do a deep dive on some of these maps. I won't go into how scheme and combat tokens work necessarily if you're not familiar with them. Basically, combat tokens, if you're on a space that has a combat token, you can go ahead and use it to buff your attack or defense, depending on if you're attacking or defending when you're in that space. And so we see those purplish spaces, and they might have a folding chair, a food tray, or an electro baton on them. For the scheme tokens, it simply costs you an action to use one of these scheme tokens in which it is discarded and returned to the box, and you get whatever the scheme token specifically says. We have the electrified floor, which deals 1 damage to each fighter in your zone. Now, just an important note on this map, 2 of those yellow scheme spaces are in the same zone, so the odds are that this one will be in that center zone, which means it might be a little harder for single health sidekicks or people with single health sidekicks to navigate, because they would have to take the really long way around rather than going through the center and risk getting electrified. It is important to note that it also deals 1 damage to each fighter in your zone, meaning you can damage yourself, which is good for some fighters. I'm namely thinking of Beowulf. That's kind of the only one I can think that really wants that. We have secret documents, which just lets you discard your hand and draw 3 cards. Originally, with the fighters that came with this map, I think this scheme token is kind of garbage. I don't think it is useful to use this that often. However, for this season, we have 2 fighters with absolutely incredible deck recursion, Daredevil and Elektra. So I could honestly see a number of use cases in which this might be desirable. Elektra could go super aggressive, kind of burn out a lot of cards from her hand on her first life, and then go ahead and discard her hand and kind of get back up to 3 cards and hopefully draw maybe some of those key cards that she's looking for. So I definitely can see her doing that, because at the end of the day, all of her cards will get reshuffled into her deck. So it's not like you're losing out on whatever cards are in your hand. You'll just get them later. For Daredevil, maybe he's just out of defense, and he really just, as long as he has defense, he's fine. Or maybe he needs his Devil of Hell's Kitchen in order to kind of basically keep his recursion up. So against fighters without feints, I could honestly see him also discarding his hand and drawing 3 cards. 3 cards is also the threshold for his ability to take place, so that might be desirable for him if he's sitting at maybe 4 cards or so. Finally, we have the security camera. You simply look at an opponent's hand and draw a card. This one, I think, is one of the best. I actually really like the electrified floor, but I really like this scheme when used with a sidekick. So imagine the scenario where my sidekick is on the space that has the security camera. I am adjacent to my opponent. It's my turn. I pop this scheme. I look at their hand. I draw a card, and then I basically get to decide what to attack with. It would almost be the same as me just choosing what to attack with off gut instinct and then maneuvering away and drawing the card in terms of hand advantage and basically whatever I attacked with. However, this not only gives you the ability to look at your opponent's hand, so you know probably what the best attack to make is, but you do end adjacent to them at the end of your turn. However, I kind of like that too, because now you know all the options that your opponent can make to attack you. And hand knowledge in this game, we know, is just so incredibly valuable, especially if you can kind of control that for not only when you attack, but also on defense, since your opponent most likely won't be drawing cards on defense if you can help it. So anyway, very cool card, very good for people with sidekicks, pretty mediocre for those without it. If you know, you know. Next, we'll go ahead and just talk about Hell's Kitchen. Now, I've already talked about how these tokens work, so I won't take as long doing that. But we have a mailbox +1, a fire hydrant +2, and also a manhole cover +2. So we see that these are just a little bit better than the previous tokens. Important to note that in the rules of each of these Marvel sets, it says that you can mix and match these tokens. For current ladder play, we have decided not to do that. So you will always see the same 6 tokens on Hell's Kitchen and Redemption Row. When you're casually at home, I highly recommend switching it up. It's a ton of fun, but I will say for the competitive scene, we want there to be some predictability when choosing the Marvel maps. Now, before I get into the scheme tokens, I would just like to preface it by saying these are absolutely bonkers, at least in comparison to the previous ones. The previous ones had their uses a little more niche, and they didn't feel like they really kind of broke the game in one way or another, but these are just kind of nuts. To start off, we have First Aid Kit, Recover 2 health, and Draw 1 card. Absolutely mind-blowing for any fighter that has no healing, right? This makes Bruce Lee have 16 health. This makes Bullseye have 16 health. This makes Alice start with 15 health with the potential to get to 21. I mean, King Arthur's sitting at a beefy 20 health. I mean, this is just, there's so many different use cases for this. And I mean, really, I don't see anybody not using this, right? When the opportunity presents itself for you to use this, do it. I mean, you recover 2 health and you draw 1 card. So it's not even like you're sacrificing a maneuver in order to do so, because you're still getting that card draw. For map, it says your next attack this turn can target any space. Now that's also important to know that if your sidekick go ahead and triggers this, and then you attack with Electra's attack would be able to target any space, and vice versa, simply because I believe it says your next attack, which is referring to you as the player. So once again, sidekicks get really good benefits here, and maybe Bloody Mary, if you start on player 1 space and get a really lucky starting hand, you can kind of wreak some havoc on your opponent. This one, pretty cool. Not too much to say about it. It came in the same set as Bullseye, and Bullseye can already do that, so it didn't feel super overwhelming there. However, Dracula being able to just smack you with his beast form right off the bat from anywhere on the map is pretty good. So super excited to see how that plays out. And then finally, we have the payphone. Absolutely nuts. I don't really need to go into why it's nuts. Choose 1 card in your discard pile and return it to your hand. This gives Dracula 3 beast forms. This gives Robin Hood 3 ambushes, 5 highway robberies. I mean, 3 defenders of Sherwood. I mean, it gives Buffy 4 regroups. I mean, this is absolutely nuts. And so I really think that this one spot, wherever it is on the map, is going to be highly coveted by anyone. I mean, if Dracula can get just another do my bidding, just kind of use the other one maybe when it doesn't matter as much, go ahead and get it back. And he's kind of in the same spot that he was previously, but now he's passed. He's taken a pass, and he's got, just one of his best cards and probably the best defense in the game in his hand. So just really good stuff going on here with the payphone. So very excited to see how it warps the meta on this map. Hanging Gardens is a map that I'll touch on briefly. Basically, if you are attacking someone in a space, in an adjacent space that has one of those +1 arrows, your attack gets +1 added to it. So it's incredibly good for melee fighters, since they generally want to be adjacent to the other opponent to attack them. It's not as good for ranged, because generally ranged fighters aren't adjacent to you that often, and so it just kind of gives melee fighters a buff without necessarily giving ranged fighters a buff. The only perks here for ranged fighters, though, is that how the zones are laid out. Ranged fighters tend to do pretty well on this map. So I think it's got a little bit of something for everyone, and this is personally one of my favorite maps. So very excited to see how it shapes up this latter season. Then, as we see with the doors parting away, we have Heorot, which, for those of you who don't know, has doors on each of these 3 spots. Those doors separate zones and also require points of movement in order to open them. Now, it is specific that the points of movement during which you can open the doors has to be spent on a maneuver. So if you have an after combat effect that moves you 3 spaces, you would not be able to move through a closed door. It is free to go ahead and close the doors, so that's super nice. But this map, to me, is so polarizing. I think some fighters do really well on it, other fighters don't do as well on it. It just, to me, it can take a really good fighter and turn them bad on this map, depending on the matchup. It can make Yananga Wukong just a horrible matchup for Yananga, at least from my experience. And I definitely should have picked it in my grand finals against Zero. But I guess my hubris, got a little ahead of me, and I chose Hanging Gardens, and we all saw how that turned out. But anyway, Heorot, fun map, but it's just personally not one of my favorites. Now we have the bronze. I will touch briefly on this. No map gimmick. Yeehaw, amazing. That's great. And we see, just some really cool things going on here with like this whole inner room. So people with 1 health sidekicks can kind of even block off access points on there. But we also see over on the left with those pinkish zones, we also have, just down at the bottom green, we also have another corridor with the green. Lots of stuff going on with this map, and I think most fighters have advantages and disadvantages on this map. So that's why I like it, and if I'm looking for just an even play, I'll probably be choosing the bronze a lot. For those of you following along, wondering what those blue symbols are, go ahead and comment down below what you think. I think some of you, especially Taylor, will have already figured out what those mean. But hopping right into it, we have Bullseye for the fighter predictions. I am just a big Bullseye fan. 14 health, highest defense is a 3. Doesn't seem like a great combo for success. However, he does it. I mean, he sometimes just annihilates opponents. I have played games against Electra, who I think is extremely good, and I have won them on very, very early turns where basically I just was able to combo her to death with, 3 of my for my next trick cards, which is a 2-value attack, draws you a card, moves you 1 space, gains you an action. After he's won combat, he can smack you for 6s or 4s that ignore your defensive value. Electra only has 2 feints, so once those are gone on her first life, she's just going to eat a lot of damage. And on certain maps, she can't really hide with her hand, and so he's just a menace to her. So very excited for Bullseye. I think for this tournament, for this ladder, I think he's got a lot of great matchups. I think he can do well into Daredevil. I think he can do well into Elektra. I think he can do well into Yananga. I think he can do well into Robin Hood. And those are only the matchups that I've played so far. I think he can struggle against Red. I think he can struggle into probably Achilles. The reason I left out Dracula, I have played it twice. I lost once as Bullseye and won another time as Bullseye on a favorable map for Bullseye. So I think it can definitely be done, but I was at 1 health at the end, and I think for 1 or 2 turns, I was sitting there at 1 health. So it's definitely not an easy matchup for him, and everybody's just kind of weighing their options pretty carefully, especially since Dracula has Do My Biddings, which just can kind of wreck your action after which you've won a combat. He's definitely got some things going for him that some of these other fighters don't. Daredevil. Amazing fighter, right? The fighter that cannot be fatigued. We kind of have Luke Cage, but that's a little different, I think, just because his recursion is so much weaker. And Daredevil kind of, the problems with Luke Cage is if during one of the reshuffles of his Still Standing and whatever other card he chose, if your Still Standing ends up at the bottom of the deck, which are the same odds as it ending up at the top of your deck, you're just kind of hosed. And Daredevil really doesn't have that problem because if you've got the right cards in your hand, you can just be blind boosting like a maniac until you get that Devil of Hell's Kitchen into the discard pile. You go ahead and reclaim it and attack whatever faintless opponent you're fighting into, and boom, you started your recursion again. Hopefully your draw next time is a little bit better. So I think, he's got great stuff going for him, cannot be fatigued. However, his defense is, once again, just like Bullseye, not larger than a 3. However, his ability will let him boost those up. However, if he's blind boosting and maybe discarding cards due to his take a knee for healing, the RNG can really, really mess with him. So very curious to see how he goes, but I think he will be a fan favorite, so I see him being played a lot. Elektra, also, I think she will do well in this meta. I don't know much about her. I played her a few times, and I've realized she's not for me. Mainly just because I haven't felt my creative itch be scratched with her. I've kind of played her the same way each game and had great success with that. Normally, if I play a fighter the same way into each matchup and I start losing some of those matchups, then I'm like, okay, how can I play this matchup differently in order to basically succeed? And I haven't had to do that yet with Electra, which either means she's incredibly powerful or my opponents haven't figured out how to play against her. And I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I generally hedge my bets that it's the latter, in that my opponents don't quite know how to play against her, especially with a new fighter. But we'll go ahead and see how that shapes out this season. Achilles, I absolutely love Achilles, and I think of the four Battle of Legends Volume 2 fighters, he is the one that I personally have touched the least competitively. I don't think we really know his spot in the meta. He can do well into Yanenga. He destroys Bloody Mary. He's pretty weak into Wukong. All right, well, we know that from the release rumble, right? Give us some new information. Okay, Robin Hood does really well into him. Okay, he destroys Little Red. Okay, that's good, but what about the big three? Crickets, honestly. I don't know. I did well as Sherlock against him, but I don't feel like one game is really conclusive at all about what that is, or what that matchup looks like, especially with his mad aggression that he can keep up. And he really doesn't have any problem killing Watson. And a lot of fighters, I think, really don't have the damage to invest in both Watson and Sherlock. I think if Watson gets in Achilles' way, he just bludgeons him to death. So I think that's not a problem for him. So I very curious to see how he does in this meta where the big three aren't involved and there are some really good matchups for him. So very curious to see how that plays out. We also have Yanenga. For those of you who really upset about seeing Yanenga in here after John highlighted that, she's the big one, I would recommend giving him a lot of trouble for that, since he is on the closed council that decides what fighters are in here. So go ahead and check out his YouTube channel down in the description and feel free to yell at him on my behalf. I think she'll do all right. I actually don't think she'll do incredible this season, because her the main strengths of Yanenga is because of how well she does into Wukong and the big three, and also she can do well into Little Red, all the high tier fighters and such. But we don't see any of those in here other than Little Red. So I think she could struggle. She struggles, or can struggle, I should say. I don't really think Yanenga really struggles, except maybe against Sinbad and also Bloody Mary. But she can struggle against a good Achilles, a good Robin Hood, a good Bullseye. I think a good Daredevil. I haven't tested it, so I don't want to say, but I think Daredevil might actually be on Sinbad level of countering, but I will need to try it out before I make any of those claims. And also a good Little Red can give Yanenga trouble. So those are what I believe to be very popular fighters, and they can all give her kind of a run for her money. And so I think we'll definitely see some challenges to Yanenga be made this season, but I'm sure John's record with her will still be absolutely crazy. We also have Dracula. I'm personally not a big Drac player, but I'm very happy to see him in the meta. We'll see how it plays out. He can do generally pretty well against melee fighters, and we've got a wide cast of melee fighters, so we'll see his ability for ping damage and drawing a card occur quite often, I think, and so generally that'll help him out for the better, I think. We also have Robin Hood. Robin Hood was my personal main before Battle of Legends Volume 2 came out. Very excited to see him and get some good plays in with him. I'm going to be honest, since Battle of Legends Volume 2 dropped, I really haven't played much of him. So I don't really know how he will do into a lot of this cast, especially Bullseye, Daredevil, and Elektra. I think he's pretty good into Yanenga and Achilles, and he can do stuff into Little Red Riding Hood with the Archer or the Outlaws being able to just kind of negate any card she plays on defense. So I think he'll do all right this season, but it could be interesting. Little Red Riding Hood, also just a top tier fighter, but she does have some counters here with Achilles, I think Robin, I think Yananga, I think Raptors. So, I think everybody here can do well into about half the fighters and struggle with about half the other fighters. So, I really think that that's good for this season, and it's not like quite as like season one where we saw a lot of meta picks. So, great for Little Red. We also have Raptors, which, who knows, right? They can destroy some fighters, get eaten alive by other fighters. So I never know where to place them competitively, but I just think that we'll see a lot of good Raptors player come out of the woodwork and hopefully just destroy some fighters. I'm always happy to see Raptors do well. Finally, Buffy. I've only played Buffy once, but I do know she does really well into Robin Hood, so she has a direct counter there. I assume her ability will help her out against Elektra, who body blocks with the hand a lot. And I don't think the hand really wants to surround her and attack her because of some of her stellar defenses to combat that. So I think she will do well with the meta picks for this season, which is good. That's all we asked for. That's the only reason my Bloody Mary was able to shine in Winter of Champions, was because she was really good into the meta picks. And also a lot of people hadn't played against my Mary before. So that was a distinct advantage for sure. So finally, I know that was a long video. Hopefully you stuck with me to the end. Final thoughts. I think we've got an amazing, cast, or I keep saying cast, but it should be roster, that for this season. I just think it'll be a lot of fun, and hopefully I hope to see around the board picks. We are missing, maybe Buffy will be on the lower side. For IM was the first one. King Arthur was for season 2. I really hope to see a lot more rounded kind of edges around the fighters that get picked. We know the Marvel fighters will get picked a lot. But the reason I also bring up Buffy is because the other 3 Buffy fighters will not be in competitive ranked until we believe that they have good matchups into a number of the fighters. However, I will say that is what we as the council has decided. But now it is time for you, the viewers, to decide. About every season, halfway through the season, I think we agreed upon, we will put out a poll of any fighter that you would like to see in the next ranked season. And whichever fighter gets the most votes, we will go ahead and put in that ranked season. So if you want to see Spike and you can make a lot of other people vote for Spike, we'll go ahead and put Spike in. If you vote for Willow or Angel, we'll also do the same. If we want to see Bloody Mary a lot, we'll go ahead and put her in. I know Luke Cage and Moon Knight were big hits for Redemption Row. If you want to see them in the next season, go ahead and vote for that. So that's something we plan on doing moving forward. I think that's really cool. I think Gary, I'm going to credit Gary with that idea. If I get it wrong, please go ahead and correct me. But Gary, if that was your idea, I think that was a great idea. Anyway, thanks, and I hope to see you on the next video.